Godzilla King of the Monsters is a sequel to the 2014 Godzilla movie directed by Gareth Edwards. Now with this film, it was very easy to see that Warner Brothers took the reactions that people had to that 2014 reboot, in which people were mostly disappointed by the fact that they didn't get a lot of Godzilla, or at least there'd be teases for fights with Godzilla and then it would pull away to something else that people deemed less interesting. And because of that, we have this movie, which in the continuity of the story takes place 5 years after Godzilla had an encounter with the Mutos in both Hawaii and San Francisco, in which the world is now in commotion as it tries to figure out what to do with all these monsters. And to be honest, I don't really know what this movie's story is. Oh wait, I'll tell you what this movie's story is. Here you go. Monsters fight and have an awesome battles in CGI and colors. Oh, and they also wanted to set up Godzilla vs. Kong in 2020. Go! Okay, if you couldn't tell by the way I approached that whole entire part of this video, I was being kind of sarcastic and overblown with what I was trying to say. But my point is that this movie was clearly made with the intention of appealing to Godzilla fans, and that's it. For better or worse, this movie has a lot of kaiju fights, a lot more than you could say the 2014 movie did, and it definitely ups the ante in that regard, both because it's a sequel, so they have to make things bigger and better, as Hollywood tends to do so, but also Warner Brothers was trying to respond to those criticisms that people had of the original movie, both so that they could cater to their fan base and also hopefully make more money in the long run by putting in visuals that people would find more interesting. And that's all good and dandy. Like, I appreciate when filmmakers actually take feedback that's given for their content and then they actually try to do something better with it. But in this case, while many are definitely satisfied by the monster fights that they got, I did not like the direction that they took with this movie at all. Before you go ahead and close this window, I want you to know that I'm not just responding to this criticism because I want good storytelling, because there are inevitably going to be people who comment on this video or who approach this link by thinking, all I wanted was monster fights in my Godzilla movie and that's it, I don't care if there's a good story or characters. As long as Godzilla punches these guys, then I'm good. Like, if that's your opinion and that's what you wanted out of this movie, that's completely fine. Film is subjective, and if your expectations wanted a movie like that, then those expectations will be met because this movie does deliver on that front. And you have to understand, with a Godzilla movie, I'm not expecting writing that is going to elevate to the level of classic literature or anything that's really going to impact me emotionally. However, what I don't like is when filmmakers tend to take the easy route when approaching their stories so that they appeal to mankind's basic interests, don't challenge them in any way, and actually incorporate elements of storytelling that actually insult and downplay their audience's expectations and their intelligence too. And I say this because throughout this whole entire movie, I felt that my time was being wasted by a story that absolutely did not make sense, characters that were more shells of humans than the ones in the 2014 version were, and ultimately everything just builds up to sequences of monsters fighting, but there was no real sense for me that the fights that they were actually having had any consequence on the world around them. Because in the 2014 Godzilla movie, even though there weren't technically a lot of fights, at least ones that we saw with our own eyes, at least I could watch that movie and understand that people were threatened by these godlike creatures that were, walking the earth and fighting each other, and there was an actual palpable sense of drama, suspense, and impact from what those things were doing on screen. There was a reason for me to care that Godzilla was fighting the Mutos in that movie, because they set it up that there was consequence there and there was actual weight behind everything that was going on. With Godzilla King of the Monsters, I felt that the screenwriting was so over the top and all over the place and scatterbrained that I never really got a sense of why I should care about these monsters fighting, other than just the basic pleasure of seeing them fight. If I'm watching a movie, I need a reason to stay invested. That's just me personally. Like, I don't want to see flashy images for the sake of flashy images, unless it's like a 5-minute sequence on YouTube. But if they're going to take my time for over 2 hours, they better leave me with a story that is cohesive from beginning to end, that makes sense for at least why the monsters are fighting and where they get to where they're going, and ultimately why I should really care about the conflict as a whole. But for me, this movie never really did that. And again, it all goes back to expectations. For anyone who wants to watch this movie just for the plain sake of monster fights, that's cool. But I've seen better monster movies than this. We've gotten movies like Jurassic Park, the 2014 Godzilla. And of course, there's also one of the prime examples of how to do a monster movie right, which is the 1975 movie Jaws by Steven Spielberg. The reason the movie works so well isn't just because there's practical effects and there's a considerable amount of horror, violence, blood, and gore in it, which will satisfy, anyone who wants to see that kind of thing. But Jaws actually works as a narrative. There are characters you care about, their motivations are clear, and there's definitely a lot that is interesting there for you to think about and consider as to people why are fighting the shark that is terrorizing Amity Island. I'm saying all these things and I'm defending people who want a story out of Godzilla, King of the Monsters, is because we've gotten movies like that. There is no reason why a filmmaker with a budget this big and with a character as iconic as Godzilla, in addition to King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan, should take the easy route. They could have done something interesting. They could have gone in the direction of going into more of the nuclear themes and the themes of war and destruction that were in the 2014 Godzilla. But they dropped that simply because people wanted more fights. And that idea in and itself isn't really that bad per se, because it provides entertainment value. But when I was watching this movie, I couldn't even get really all that much fun out of the fight scenes. There was so much visual noise going on in the action sequences in general, to where it actually made my eyes hurt from watching it. A lot of this has to do with the fact that these action sequences are so full of color, so full of light at times, and there's a lot of stuff that's happening while the camera is close to where the action is, that it's not only hard to follow, but also there's just too much to focus on. When movies pull their camera back and allow the audience to observe what's going on without really having to have their eyes chase around so many images that are bouncing off the screen, that makes for a more pleasing visual experience. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, while it does have a lot of fights that are cool in scale and have breathtaking images, specifically these ones right here, the end result is something which just has murky cinematography, CGI that is less impressive than that of the 2014 Godzilla, and ultimately is just eye-numbing. At least it was for me. That probably won't be the same for others. But if you're going to make the argument that all this movie needed were cool fight scenes and Godzilla beating up other monsters, then you at least need to make the monster fights fun. For me, they weren't. They were just tiring, and they were very hard to watch. Although I will say this, there are definitely some positives to this movie. You can't really fault any of the actors in this cast. I mean, Godzilla, King of the Monsters has a ton of A-list actors. You have Millie Bobby Brown, Ken Watanabe, Vera Farmiga, Sally Hawkins, Kyle Chandler. There are a lot of great people in this movie that are very easy to watch, and they're all giving fine performances, but the dialogue they're given is terrible most of the time. Their characters don't receive any development whatsoever. And yeah, you can argue that you don't necessarily need a lot of character development in a movie like this, but there's a lot of time spent with these people. I'd say at least half of the movie is spent with characters who you don't necessarily care about, and so a lot of time is wasted on a story that is nonsense, and also with characters that have little to no impact on the overall story. So again, this movie's clear intent was to show a lot more fights than the 2014 Godzilla did, but because there's so many scenes with human characters that have no progression whatsoever, it kind of ruins the overall results of what the filmmakers were going for. Back to what I was saying about the positives though, there are some very awesome visual moments that are in this movie despite the negative ones. And I also liked the score. Both the musical score for this movie and the 2014 Godzilla are pretty good, even though I think I prefer the 2014 Godzilla score more because of the horror themes that were in there and kind of boosted the tension in some sequences. Overall though, I was pretty let down by what Godzilla King of the Monsters gave me. If you enjoyed the movie, then that's awesome. I would hope that anything I say doesn't take you away from your personal satisfaction with the film. But for me, it's my job as the one who's given this content to provide you with an honest opinion, and one that is based on things that I noticed and observed watching it. And for me, I just did not have a fun experience watching it. So because of that, I will be giving Godzilla King of the Monsters a D. As far as an age recommendation goes, I didn't really remember that much language being in this movie, although I think there is one use of the F word. And then otherwise, there's no sexual content. It's pretty much just large-scale monster action from beginning to end. And because of that, since there's not really much of language to really be worried about, I'd say it's best for anyone who's at least 12 years old. Thanks again for tuning in to my channel, guys. My next video should be my ranking of all the main 2019 new releases that I saw, so look forward to that pretty soon. It should be up in the next couple days. Otherwise, if you like this content, please check out my Facebook, Letterboxd, and Instagram pages that are all linked in the description below. And thanks again for watching, guys. Have a good one.